Well, let me try not to cough. How about that? Good morning, everyone. It is Monday, January the 12th, 2026. Can you believe we've been doing it for 2026 years now? Probably longer, right? Before they started that clock. Anyway, hope everyone is ready for a wonderful, magnificent, incredible Monday. I know I am. Start of another official work week, not to be confused with weekend times and such. And yeah, there we go. Was chatting with a buddy of mine over on the other side of the planet as he was asking me some questions in regards to the things that are happening over here as he's seeing. See, one of the cool things about this Tower of Babel that we have, that is the internet, is it's really cool if you know people on the ground around the world. Around the country is pretty cool too, but the main thing is to see you can get real world perspective, and that's awesome. And you know, it's so funny because like today it was going to be like, oh, what we're going to do type thing, but again, it's like watching and staying as far away from social media as I could over the weekend, which I did pretty well at. That, you know, it's so funny. These, and I say this in such a vague conspiratorial way when it comes to what the boxes program us with and show us and what we're supposed to think about and feel. And it's by design, and it's sadly, it's not so much control, but it's a matter of engagement, and engaged in a manner that has an end to keep you plugged in to just these screens, right? Right here we are. Versus, I mean, the best, you know, I really try to be very safe-ish in talking about these things, not because I'm worried about the ramifications of being banned or shadow banned and all that crap again. It is annoying. It's very annoying because it's a very real thing. Good morning, Damien. But the bigger thing is that when we see what they're putting in front of people and what it does to eat up your time and your life, that is the biggest travesty of all. And again, I've watched, again, I just kind of hop on long enough just to maybe kind of look, just make sure nothing really is happening. But people, our compassion and empathy has been weaponized. That's really the bottom line, the way I see it. And when you do that, people, they get in your head, and as soon as they're in your head, let me make sure that that's okay. I didn't do the headphone test. So anyway, if there was reverb, there shouldn't be any now. But when our perception is controlled by just what we see as the algorithm feeds us, it's not good. It's just not. I mean, you can get too many lows, but you can also get too many highs as well. It's all about a balance, but those machines are meant to just keep you engaged. I won't necessarily say that it's solely aligned to one agenda per se, but definitely for echo chamber's sake. And I did catch the George Carlin clip that's went viral again where he's talking about when it comes to like your identity is based on ideology versus your personality. This is where it is like an insane form of manipulation, because if all you can connect yourself with and express yourself with is an identity of a broad identity, right? Like you get into a right or a left or any of those type of things. Well, when those things get attacked, well, you take it personally because that's what you have absorbed for yourself to be, versus your real personality, right? Let's see, check out David's suggestion here. Would you give yourself a short intro? As I've never actually seen the beginning of your thought for the day, just an idea. You know, I've thought about that, and it's funny because that's why it's really, I'm glad that I made the decision to just focus on YouTube only. Yeah, and well, what's funny though, and in fairness to your suggestion, and to me, it's like where I start with an idea, but then if something pops like right before I go on, I'll shift gears. And this shifting gears came because, again, early this morning, like I said, I got a buddy of mine over in Poland, and he had posed the question to me in regards to what the hell is going on over there now, because all what he was seeing was framing Minneapolis as just these ICE agents are just randomly snatching people up, almost like Gestapo, right? But that's not the whole story, or even close to the real story. And so, but again, that is the information he's getting, and and we don't know what is going out, right? As far as like, people can absolutely positively have an opinion on policies and things all around the world as we do, but when it's skewed, there's a problem. Okay, there is a lag between when you start and YouTube post it. You know, and that's a very good point. And again, I think I'll build an intro of some sort to kind of buffer, but I just haven't done it yet because I don't even know why I'm that concerned, considering this is just coffee talk. I'm not a slave to the clock on this thing, right? I can free flow and all that all day long. So excuse me. Yeah, so I need to do that. That's a very good suggestion, Damien. So I will definitely put together an intro, because one of the it's like when you do, like, I know, like if you upload something onto YouTube and it does like the instant premiere thing and there's like a 2-minute countdown clock, that drives me nuts. And then thinking about how in presenting things now, it's like the long intros. If it's just going to be on YouTube, long intros to me they're just not good. You know, if I've got to sit through 30 seconds worth of graphics and images and stuff and music, and like the old days of a television show, drives me nuts. I don't have the attention span for it, I guess, or the patience, one of the two, I don't know. But getting back into thinking about what perceptions are. Oh, well, that's fair. That's fair. That's actually that's a good point, as far as like having to figure out what's going on to start with. Yeah, there needs to be like some kind of way to buffer in a summary thing. Now, well, it's one of those things to where I probably should start utilizing more of the tools, as far as like having a lower third that could just keep up what the topic is. That's a good idea, to go that way. Yeah. Yeah. See, well, and that's the thing. Just start the feed. That's what I'm doing. And again, and it can, because again, it's like my audience is very wonderfully us, and I'm good with that. It'll grow as it goes. It'll be as people find any kind of value in what I'm going on with and such, and the way the chat develops. But because again, it is kind of like willy-nilly. I've got it built around my 3 pillars of the things. Okay, these are my lanes that I'm staying in, so I don't go too far. But sometimes, like when I get popped with a question from my buddy, to be able to just kind of riff on a little, because I don't really care to comment a whole lot on what's happening in the emotional heat of the moments, and we've got a lot of that right now, and it's like nonstop, but whether you're in Minneapolis or what's happened in LA or whatever, for my own personal sanity and emotional balance, my philosophy is pretty simple right now. I like to know what's happening. I know I'm not going to get the facts straight, period, from the sources. It's not going to happen, because you've got too many different perspectives that are framing what you're seeing. And that's always been a thing, right? So, yeah, and that's it. As far as like who's here in the audience, that's it. It's like this is not necessarily a thing that I'm looking to, again, be like the next online pontificator for everything. That's not really what I'm going for. I mean, if that happens, sure, fine. But I also know that in doing these type of things, you do have to kind of niche down. And that's where there will be like a podcast presentation or produced program for each of the things, the pillars that I built out for myself to work with. But that will be very niche and targeted. But this is just kind of free-flowing and getting myself to where just being comfortable in front of the camera and on the microphone again, and throwing something out there for the world to either learn something from, think about a different way, or show you that you're not crazy, and definitely that we're not all alone out here. There's a great YouTube channel, if you get a chance, Uncle Tim's Rants and Reviews. I came across him, I guess it was last year, early on in the year. He's a fella in Chicago, and his thing, just topically when you look at it, he's just got the toys and stuff in the background, and he was just, ranting and reviewing about those type of things. But as the world continued to throw things out, and he'll kind of share his thoughts and opinions on that. And I appreciate that a lot, because from everything I can, and I say this with the utmost respect, he's just a normal dude observing the same things that you and I are. And he's just sharing his thoughts, and it's funny because in his thoughts, we match up a lot. And if you see Tim and you say, again, he's just an average normal dude living his best life as he can, right? But from the perspective of being in Chicago. And again, what's really happening there in day-to-day lives versus what gets reported in the media can be two totally different things. However, he does say, well, yeah, this ain't good. But again, there's just, I don't know, it's just such a weird space. It's almost like, I think the best way I could equate it would be almost thinking like shortwave radio type stuff. The amateur radio people who have to put a lot more work in to actually do broadcasting than professional radio. Just saying. Sort of like the amateur wrestler versus the professional wrestler. The technical versus the show. So, not hating on either one, but it is what it is. I don't know, but again, thinking about what gets put in, going back to what I saw over the weekend with people on social and their reactions to what is happening out there in the country and around the world, and all of this, all the flashpoints and policy changes or whatever. I mean, it's a massive amount of things happening at once. That's like not one person. There's no one human being who can like absorb and actually process all that on its topical surface level. It's just not going to happen. It's too much. It's too big. It's too deep. And we don't know shit. Let's be real. None of us are truly... I'm not an economist. I am not an attorney, a prosecutor, a judge, engineer, all these different specialties that you would need to be considered knowledgeable, let alone an expert in a field. But yet, since everyone has access to a microphone and a camera and an opinion, that's been turned into being an expert, and it's not. And that hurts people's feelings when you say that, right? That's why when it came to my news reporting style, I always made it a point. It would be, I tried to make it like a little C-SPAN-y, but not too boring, to where it's like I turn the camera on and capture the moment as it is. I edit for time's sake, but not for context's sake, because I wanted to keep things as middle of the road as possible. Yeah, so there you go. Wise men believe only in lies, trust in the absurd, and expects the unexpected. Well, and that is still a very, very fair philosophy to think of. But we're working in a different space now. You and I in the real world, yes. And that's where I try to keep my ground. Is like, inside of my bubble, what do I see? In the real world, where I could reach out and touch it. One thing I know is people behind the wheel of vehicles now have lost a part of their mind because of the traffic accidents that we're seeing around here that are getting more, that are intense, fatalities, and it's totally the fault of the people behind the wheels. Just something about the civilized aspect of being on the roads is out the window. And that's real. Also, the suicide rate is ridiculously high. So I think both kind of say a similar message in desperation in people. Now, what's causing that desperation? Well, I don't know for sure, but when you've got economics that you're facing, that makes things harder to do the things that you did before for, it's like $20 could take care of my usual daily round type things that I would do for dog food and cat food, coffee, stuff like that. to where that $20 bill is shrunk a lot, right? But okay, fine. But the other side of the coin on that is that the bigger picture stuff that everybody's reacting to online isn't in your bubble. You want to be mindful of it because these protest type things, as we've seen over the past 6 years, which had calmed down there for a while, but you'll remember 2020. I hope you remember 2020. And then that was, my gosh, you can't, it's so much of the stuff is like, I get dumbfounded when people are like surprised about things. Meaning that when something pops off, that bad things happen. But not ask the question as to why. And again, it's like, I don't care to hypothesize a theory of who is behind anything, because I honestly don't know. I can observe things, I can hear talking points, but I cannot say for sure that names that are named are actually the responsible party. I'm more of the mindset to think that the people who are truly orchestrating things are the people you'll never know their names. But you got to have somebody up front to play either the good guy or the bad guy. And this isn't being wishy-washy. This is trying to be responsible with a microphone and a camera, right? And it's complex. All of it's very complex. There's no, well, excuse me. In a society, pardon me as I have an earthquake, but inside of the collective society and conversations, the hardest part in the world right now is really ascertaining where truth lies. But truth doesn't lie in headlines, right? And I say lie as in being there, not lying, and not telling the truth. But when you look at what is being fed into the pool for all of us to pick apart and consider as facts, because our sources that we're seeing tell us these are facts. But what do we know, right? I know that if a similar protest thing pops up here, I will be able to have a better perspective on it because it's happening here. What's happening in another state or another country, I do not know. I only know from the information that's being fed to me through these similar sources. And those are always, have always, and will always be, narrative will be structured by someone creating a narrative for a purpose. Now, stripping all of that away down to the bare bones, let's ask ourselves this. Where do we stand from a moral perspective? Because I really believe if we can strip away all of the noise of it and get down to that and say, who benefits from this? How do you benefit from this? What is this doing for your time on the planet? And what could you be doing instead with your time that could either improve that situation or another situation? You know what I'm saying? It's like for all the time I see people get into the online arguments and discourse and debates about things that are not inside of their own personal bubble. What could they be doing instead? So, you know what I'm saying? Does that make sense? I hope it makes sense, because people are taking for granted and wasting the only true commodity that a human being has individually. And that's your own personal time. That clock is running for as long as you're opening your eyes every day, to the point where you close your eyes at the end of the day. And to give that away freely on things that, how proactive are you in it? How much does it truly matter? What are you willing to do to fix it? If it's a problem, what are you going to do to fix it? From my perspective, for me, that I put out there, and to do something like this podcast thing, is I'm hoping that in conversation, and I share the things that I do, which I'm working on getting myself a little bit more open about sharing certain things that I think, wow, this was really cool and I did this because, and sharing that story because it may be something you've thought about doing yourself and you didn't think you could, but I assure you, if I can, you can. And at least go for it and try. And just the way I do things, maybe a way that you never thought of doing it before, like writing a book, doing the 3D prints and modeling and stuff like that, or creating a personal project that you see as being a benefit for more, this virtual stump thing. And now that we're in January, the heat is on, running up to the March primary. Early voting starts February 17th. So getting, doing something that can help people learn things, to me, is the best I got. That's the best I can do. I know how to use the technology in ways that can help put things into a hub for people to be able to look like, or to look at, and then make their own conclusions. That's what I can do. Now, in that process, it also gives me the opportunity to offer my skills as a service to certain select people and businesses. And that's how we pay rent to stay on the planet, right? But it's with the intent of helping people accomplish their own goals. My philosophy forever, when it came to, like, I say philosophy, maybe motto may be better, but like is when it comes to doing productions, like, you dream it, I'll build it. And that was the service side of things. And I had the water's a little muddy in there in my own head because I really enjoyed doing that. But the catch-22 was always like, I don't like charging for it. But I have to charge for it because we have to pay the bills, because we pay rent to be on the planet. And it's like, okay. And finding the balance. And I found my balance now. And that's awesome. And I like to share how I found the balance, because that may be something that you're wrestling with. If you're like me, I'd say my biggest Achilles heel is, like, once I learn how to do something, I will unintentionally shift into a gear that is like, well, if I'm doing it, you can do it. So you should. And it's like a little bit of a guilt thing, is like to charge someone for that, you know? But I shouldn't, because, well, that's time invested, and you want to get a return on your investment, right? So I don't know, but that's the thing. But that's why I put together what I've got with the thing, and that is great. Never argue with the internet. That is a fantastic perspective there, Damien. It really is. Don't argue. I look at it like this: if I see, or when I see, people really go all in, one way or the other, pro, con, happy, sad, over things. If it like, it's one of those things that, like, when it hits and you're like, oh, like what I see, and I'm going to say something very unpopular here, but when I see people who find themselves feeling distraught, that's real, okay? It doesn't matter what side you're on. When you feel distraught about something, when you see it, that's a real emotion from you being pulled out, right? And then when people share their coping mechanisms of how they appear to get through things, and I'm going to sound like I'm picking on something, and in a way I am. But when someone posts their perspective and their true heart, even if it's angry, or even if it's happy, or whatever, but when the replies and suggestions for getting through something is thoughts and prayers, I loathe that thing. I like the idea, but it's such a lip service thing that I don't think people understand what they're even saying. Elaborate on what you mean by thoughts and prayers. More so than just that little catchphrase that is what people respond with. It's no different than just saying happy birthday, right? Thoughts and prayers, thoughts and prayers, thoughts and prayers. Because I think those terms, they allow for thoughts that confuse, or not necessarily, maybe not confuse, maybe that's not the right word, but that will allow for people to take the words and interpret them and define them as they see for them, right? What is a thought to you? What is a prayer to you? What does that mean? Because if you just throw it out there as a generic thing, that can cause a problem, you know, because, like, ascribing to again, like, when you say thoughts and prayers, I know one thing is it's going to, the first thing that will come to someone's mind is a particular religion that they attach prayer to, right? And not saying that that's bad at all, but if you are very much anti-religious, then what are you going to do with that? You know, and again, it's like there's just certain catchphrases that are used. I'm not going to go into that deeply right here, but that frankly don't make sense. And that's what I think will lead people away from a religious practice as a whole. And when someone feels that their religion is the only religion, period, end of statement, there's nothing good that will ever come of that. You'll never convince me differently. And I know that will offend some, but guess what? If you're offended by that statement, you're part of the problem. Until you can tell me, or if you care to tell me, because I mean, if you get, the only reason I would even care for you to tell me is if you're going to swing on me because I said something like that. But to explain to me why yours is. Because if you can give me an answer that is genuinely true from your perspective, and you're saying it with the best of intentions, you're like, no, really, do it this way. I'm recommending this because it did this for me, and here's why and how. That is a conversation I'm willing to listen to. But if it's just 'cause, and you have nothing else other than, well, it's always been this way, then we just don't need to have a conversation, because we're not going to have a conversation. And that's just something. Dang, I just want to talk about what y'all was going to do this week. Be all forward moving and doing things with your time. But I had to go a little deeper on it, because again, thinking about having a friend of mine on the other side of the planet who is observing the U.S. through the lens of their media and boxes. Because here's the thing, a lot of people don't understand their, again, I'm not saying the people who are seeing it this way, but the people over here, we in the West, and U.S. especially, and I'm just as guilty as anyone else, is that we are brought up inside of our pop culture the way we were, and believe that's it. Yet all the other countries on the planet had their own forms too. And it's completely foreign to us, and it's hard to even think about. But a lot of our culture definitely seeped into the other nations to where we don't see that in return, right? It's like, okay, a popular television show in the United States, like, say, Dukes of Hazzard, okay? That's a U.S. thing, but it was introduced around the world, and some cultures picked up on it and enjoyed seeing the Dukes of Hazzard. So they kind of like drank that in a little bit, and it became a part of their pop culture at some point. But we don't get that in return. The best we may have is like stuff from the BBC. And that's about the only I can really say that really comes back across. And their cultural thing becomes a part of our water cooler talk stuff. Same thing with Canada or Mexico. Now, there could be language barriers that could hold that up, but in like the English-speaking countries, I don't know. It's just interesting to me. What did you say there? Now, the atheist, there is no downside to believing in a non-existent God. Well, see, and the thing with atheists, though, to me, that's like it's a funny thing with atheism, the way I see it, because to me, it's a very arrogant thing. And quite frankly, I've never been able to entertain the idea of a one and done, this is chaos personified, you showed up, do whatever, do it, wherever, because you have no barometer for a moral code in that line of thought. And quite frankly, it's a dangerous thing, because on an individual level, that you don't want to look into the bigger questions of why and how. Right? As far as like, how did this happen and why are we doing it? Because to me, atheism will lead to a path that will lose value for human life quickly. Because quite frankly, if there isn't a consequence for life of some sort, then you're walking into a territory where life becomes worthless or meaningless. And that's dangerous. So you can do what you want to do on a personal level, but when it becomes but that's the funny thing. When it comes like atheism, when it becomes a collective, well, it just became a religion. Prove me wrong. Because if you have a group of atheists together, what are they doing? Well, they're having fellowship in their own religion that has an ending that is just a black screen. But then again, it's not even a black screen, because if there's nothing, there's not even a screen, let alone a black one. So, and I personally just cannot ascribe to it just because of lived experience. But I cannot 100% endorse a particular religion, because inside every religion, is so many factions and denominations that decided to tweak what the message is from their individual religions. And that's not wanting to be wishy-washy either. It's just a matter of one group says you shouldn't dance, another one says girls shouldn't wear makeup, another group says that you got to pray 5 times a day or else, or don't eat meat on Friday, etc., on down the line, where it does nothing if you break it down to a basic universal law or set of laws that are the things that you can't, you just, there's no arguing unless you just want to be an ass. Because there are certain things that are just, again, the day any one person, one human, one leader, one whatever, wants to move forward with anything like that, okay? If you want to impress me and you want to convert me to anything, you be the first person to walk up to me with an open palm and with the other hand wide open, not just a magic trick sleight of hand, but you bring forth to me a teaspoon of sand materializing right there in the palm of your hand. Once you can do that, then I will give you 100% support and belief, because that's the thing. If you could just materialize from nothing, something, then we'll have a conversation. In regards to, you are absolutely right, because no one can do that to this day. Everything has to come from a source, period. That's just it. I may be a little loose in my position right there, but it's not intentionally loose. It just is what it is. But I don't know. I think the biggest moral question of all is, why do we allow it to ourselves? And that's the thing. It's like, why do we allow it when we see the horrible things? Well, hopefully we find ourselves as a collective forming a society that does question those things and say, why do we allow this? Because to say that you can't do that, which is funny, because it's like, then you get into that question and thought of free will. Because if everyone has a free will, well, then everyone has some room to wiggle, right? How do you contend with that? Well, you debate. Okay, that's fair. And I can go along those lines. But I knew, here's what I knew early on, like in the early 90s, when we started seeing the victim mentality. If you were around then and were paying any attention, everyone became a victim. No one was responsible for their own actions. And so with that mindset getting ingrained back then, because I mean, we're looking at what, 30 years ago, almost 40 years ago, that mindset that it was not your fault, when it very well could have been. There were circumstances, there could have been influences that were around that were stronger than your own, that overpowered you into their way of thinking, manipulated you, programmed you, propagandized you. But once that got in where it was never anyone's fault, personally, that's when it became a problem. Because weaponizing that thing, that to me is like the beginning of the true decline of Western society. Because if it was something that your parents didn't do when you were a child, caused you to become the thing you are now, versus at some point taking a personal responsibility. And okay, for instance, I can say this, it's like there are characteristics with my parents and traits of my parents that I just couldn't go along with. I was like, nah, it doesn't sit right. I think you might be a little short-sighted on this. And so I shifted and adjusted, and I applied things to my own life and for my family's life that I have that I think move the needle in a better direction. And so, well, you know, and you're right there. That's a good point. Starting in the 70s and becoming a thing with the McDonald's coffee case again, and it's the sensationalizing of things that, again, it's like, well, think about like the McDonald's coffee case when you get down to it. Think about that. Someone allegedly got third-degree burns on their woo-woo because the coffee was too hot. They sued McDonald's. But the truth of the matter is the settlement in that never really occurred. But it was a great headline for a long time. But then it would lead to a lot of other things that became just asinine. If you don't realize that coffee's hot, well, let's dial back your understanding of things. But now the McDonald's is here. It's like there've been plenty of times where the lid is not properly on the cup whenever they hand it to me through the drive-through. But in fairness, thanks to that case, it's just plugged into the back of my head and the collective consciousness as a whole, I hope, that check the lid just to make sure you don't get burned. But other people would love to have that burned because then they know they can get millions of dollars from McDonald's for negligence. Even though the truth is they didn't. Just saying. But we don't think about that part. But it opened up a line of thought that then goes into all the legislation with tort reform and all these other things where you're screaming for our government to regulate everything. And that never works out. And we can see that in everything. It's like when you get policing things that don't necessarily need to be policed, and when you get into legislating morality, whoo, son, you're begging for trouble. And we've seen it time and again. So that's the slippery slope. Because when you think about, all right, I'll go ahead and go specific. When you think about things like when they began legislating matters in regards to sexuality, you have a problem. Because then when it's legislative, then you find yourself in a situation to where when the government puts it on the books as a law or a policy or a rule that must be followed, you're giving personal choice away to someone to have authority over you. Because how does it work then? Once it becomes rule, law, policy, then that means there'll be a mediator that will determine whenever there is a debate or discussion about an issue that comes up in that field, like when it came to gay marriage. And I'm not saying one way or the other on that, other than once that became law and law to follow, look at the cascade that came after the fact. And there was a no-win situation there, because as soon as gay marriage became a legally binding thing, then they had to follow the same policies and procedures as traditional marriage, both equally sticky, because sometimes that long-term agreement falls through, and then you got to go through divorces and things like that. And it's the same, right? Sort of, maybe. But then traditional marriage things they have a group of, traditions and standards, like the cake thing, all right? So since gay marriage, once it became a thing that was federally approved, I don't even know if that's the right word, but we'll say that it became law, all right? Well, then that meant those folks were entitled to the same things as a traditional marriage. Okay, in a fair and just society, sure, why not? But once it gets legal, that's when you open the door. If someone who has a bakery and says, I'm not really down with that, it goes against what I do, I'm not really into it. And then you get into the civil rights aspect of things. And it becomes this big, nasty, slippery slope. Without going back to, let's go down to the root of legal marriage, no matter who or what you are. When it comes to legal marriage, you're going into a property agreement as far as your contract with the government, which is the marriage license that you purchase. But if you don't do that, then say you're just shacking up, as the old term goes, and it doesn't matter whether you're gay or straight, either way. The main thing is if you don't have that legal binding document, if the two of you do part ways, there's no one to mediate the stuff, right? And therein lies so many of the never-ending circles of distraction, because we rooted for someone else to deal with our problem. It's complicated. That's the thing. That's why I don't have an opinion one way or the other, because I don't have control over another human being. I don't. I have no control over you or her or him or them or whatever. I don't. And I don't want to. I don't. That's the beautiful part. I don't feel a compulsion to convert anyone into anything other than being the best you can be. And the best way I can define you being the best you can be is that you take care of yourself to where you are at a point of happiness, personal internal happiness, that you yourself want to just be able to encourage others to do the same without hitting them with a billy club or something along those names, and legislating them out of existence or into existence. Just saying. That's just kind of my take on things, because I don't have, and nor do I want, control of other people, unless you get into my own personal bubble and then you want to impose something inside of my bubble that I don't want in my bubble. Then we'll have words. We'll figure it out. We'll either debate it, or we'll go the more primitive form of human civilization if need be. Because why not? I mean, it's like, if you want to, but that's where we are now, because now people believe that their idea is the idea, and there are no consequences for anything. See, and what I just said there, I know there are consequences to people now more than ever being offended by what I said and taking out of context what I mean, because I only said a portion, right? We didn't have a conversation. And you can be late, and you don't actually, nowadays we've crossed the threshold where you don't even have to say anything or do anything. Actually, people could see Daffy Duck back there and say that I'm an animal abuser because I am propagating an idea that you should get a duck and put him in a Superman costume, because that's just cruelty to animals. There are people who will say that, I have no doubt. Or I am culturally appropriating the Brits by having that little animated Beatles wall art thing going on there, and I'm disrespecting their culture by turning them into a flat 2D image and was trivializing the legacy of the Beatles. Shut up. But you see what I'm saying? That, I mean, and it doesn't, you don't actually have to do something. People can scream fire in the movie theater with no consequences now. And it's just fascinating to watch. I'm not saying that's a good fascination. Not necessarily saying it's a bad fascination. It's some form of entertainment that we've evolved into. And that's why, and I hate it that I paid too much attention, and that's not saying I'm smart, but just I observed enough to watch and see and do to see you. I've lost so much interest in the things that I just genuinely could enjoy, like my popcorn movies. It's really got to be one of my top fives for me to watch ever again. Like the original Star Wars trilogy and the prequel trilogy. I can still give them a go, but they're further and apart than they used to be. That's like, that was always my holiday stuff. Thanksgiving to Christmas, I would just kind of leave Star Wars on. Yeah, it was just a thing. Ghostbusters, the original one. Tombstone with Val Kilmer and Kurt Russell. Those are like my go-tos. Goodfellas, right? Those movies right there are the ones that are like I can still sit and enjoy as a rewatch. But a lot of the other stuff, like Indiana Jones, can't watch it anymore. It's just no, and I loved it. And most of the other stuff, I can't sit and suffer through it again. Not that it's dated, not that it's passé or anything like that, but it's just it doesn't work for me like that anymore. Consequences, I hope, are becoming a thing again, but unfortunately, to put them back into play, and here's what's happening. This is my take, okay? And if I'm going to comment, well, here I go. But with what's happening with protests now, the consequences that are being portrayed, the problem with it is that when consequences were removed for so long that they seem to have been forgotten, that there are consequences, when they get implemented again, oh snap. Here's a very benign analogy for that, okay? You and I lived in a world, if you're in Gen X, where you remember stores closing, right? And they still do, right? On the whole, stores close. But then we got into that magical point in the late 80s into the early 90s where we were introduced to the concept of the Walmart Supercenter that happened to be open 24 hours a day. The most convenient thing in the world. The Walmart was open around the clock. So if you were so inclined, or it just worked out better for you, you could do all of your shopping for your needs and your wants at 2 o'clock in the morning. And it was great. I miss those days. But then along comes 2020 and the need to keep everybody safe. So let's start closing the Walmart again like it did originally at 11 o'clock. And it sucks. It does. It sucks. At least it's not like 9 o'clock like it used to be way back then, if you remember that. But it just, it's like we had it for longer. We had it without it longer than we had it with it, as far as like the 24-hour thing. But now that it's gone, but now that, again, post 2020 people, kids, teenagers, they're not familiar with that 24-hour Walmart, right? So they didn't miss it. You know, if you didn't have it, you don't miss it, right? But for those of us who did have it and enjoy the convenience of it, it's like, well, there you go. So in that convenient point that we had, where we technically, well, this is really loose, but we could shop 24 hours a day. So take that as the no consequences aspect of life. Meaning that if you didn't manage your time before the place closed at 9 or 10 or 11 o'clock, well, you had a free fall because you could show up at 2 o'clock in the morning. And showing up at 2 o'clock in the morning was great, and it worked out. But then they had to impose a consequence. Follow me on that. So the consequence was they started opening and closing 6 a.m. to 11 p.m. Shit, now I got to pay attention to time again because I don't have the freedom, lack of consequence, of respecting time. So, you see what I'm saying? I think that's about the most benign way to kind of really point out consequences versus no consequences. Because now we find ourselves in moments of rush. Like you forget something that, oh damn, I really do need that and I forgot it. Ah crap, it's 10:55, I can make it. But as soon as I walk in the door, they're going to start screaming at me, we're closing in 3 minutes and all that. But again, there's a consequence there, back in it, and you get mad about that. It's like, well, why don't y'all just open up again? And there's a lot of arguments for that, because personally, one of the things that I noticed very, very quickly, and I moaned and groaned about myself, is like when Walmart going from the 24-hour back to a 6 to 11 thing, it saved them a ridiculous amount of payroll hours. I mean, seriously, they made money by closing the doors, right? A penny saved is a penny earned. Well, there you go. And they were still the only real game in town because everybody else was forced to close, but they were more essential. And so I have no sympathy for that. And then that's why when I see the inflation numbers hitting the Walmart and the prices going up, I have no sympathy for the Walmart and their claim, well, we have to adjust. No. But I'm not going to tell a corporation how to do their pricing. I just simply won't buy their stuff. But I don't have a right to dictate their pricing, but I do have a right not to shop at any place. So it is what it is in that. But again, it's always a slippery thing. Oh yeah, 4 a.m. at Walmart. That is true because by 4 a.m. they'd already had everything restocked on the shelves and everything. And that was handy. So you got a fresh, brand new store at 4 in the morning and no other people around. I liked that too. I really did. It was nice. So again, but there was no consequence of disrespecting time. That's about the best way I could put that. So, but then it's gone, and then you got to pay attention, and then you got to deal with it. And again, it's first world problem stuff. But at the same time, I think it's indicative of that lack of consequence for a while. And if you're in a city that doesn't, well, and actually during the whole COVID thing, right? When everything was shut down, everything was being pushed off. And one of the things that a lot of people don't, and I see people complaining about the prosecutor's office here locally, right? Now, there's nuances that are brought up that I cannot speak to. One thing I can speak to, though, is once the court proceedings, which were already heavy, loaded, and backlogged, right? Because there are stupid people doing stupid things. But then once you shut that down, then you got worse than a bottleneck. You've got literally a dam. And then as the dam is getting backed up further and further and further and further and further, and the pressure is building, whenever they were able to start working on getting people back and getting cases back on before the judge and holding trials, I mean, you got a year, 2 years, some cases 3 years of cases that didn't get worked, but they're still there, and new ones were piling on top. So there is an overwhelm inside of the system that most people really don't appreciate because, again, you want to be able to walk in and buy the sugar and walk back out and you're cool. Or go in, pay the speeding ticket, and get out really quick. But when it's backlogged like that, because it's still just a thing, it's a human thing that we have to provide a service for, it gets backlogged. And I've done that for a long time. The last case there was a case that, gosh, when did that thing start? Shit, I mean, this has been going on for many years now, Okay, because you always had to deal with things like continuances and stuff like that. But now with that backlog that still exists, there's one case that is still a dangling Chad that I just got a call about just the other day that I may be coming back and being called to court to testify in the evidence stuff that I put together, and that gets a little tricky because it's been minimum going on 3 years now that I worked on the stuff for the case. I'm fortunate in the way my head works. I do remember. I could look at it again real quick and I tell you exactly what I did pretty fast. But so I started talking politics and you got 12 seconds. I bet I did. Because again, if you think for 1 second that the things that are coming out of your mouth, either by way of words or video or text, do not get just flagged, man, quick. Because again, the online platforms, they've got to take into account that they can be held responsible if I were to say something inflammatory, unless they want that inflammatory thing to come out of my mouth like other people. That sounds conspiratorial, but it's true. We know this now. It's there. It's like, this is how shadow banning happens. This is how banning in general happens. Or if it's something that supports a narrative on either side, but they want to make sure the other people stay engaged with it. If you're hitting the right buttons, they're going to push you harder, right? Because you're serving a need. We are the monkeys, man, providing the ongoing entertainment for people. But again, going back to it, it's so funny. It's like, for all the opportunities we have for great communication and discussions all around the world now with the technology, that it's not as productive as I think it could be. We could be doing better things with that time and attention, but we don't. We do some of the dumbest shit ever. And I'm cool with the dumb entertainment stuff. I really am. It's like, because if I don't like it, I don't watch it. But like when you watch like TikTok trends, or they'll come up with some challenge or something that's just dumb. You're like, what? But at least I'm entertained by it. So I'll give that not a pass, but it's like, okay, fine. But when people get caught up emotionally in things that they have no true control over, and they become truly distraught when something is 50, 100,000 miles away or more, I don't like seeing that. I don't, because it's like, when you give that energy to something so far removed, and you really think about like all the political discourse that began in 2016, to where people really turn their lives and their identities around either a blue or a red, or a Republican or a Democrat, and then they went all in. It was a life or death battle, right? But what else could they have done instead? I'm just saying. I hope that people will take that, just a fraction of that time, to improve their own abilities and skills. Yeah. Yeah, see, there you go. See, I talked too long. I did. And so now then the stream is dragging, and I'm going in a direction that is just not favored. And that's okay. And I don't care if anybody thinks I'm paranoid in saying that, because it's just what I've observed over the years and watched these things happen. But hell, I've been rambling for a while on a Monday that I was hoping to get you more motivated. Maybe I did, though. Because if I could just convince you, anyone out there, to before you make the next comment on a thing that's not in your bubble, and turn that 10 seconds into 10 seconds to becoming a better plumber, a better writer, a better painter, a better vacuum cleaner operator, vacuuming your floor, and helping you regain that 10 seconds, 20 seconds, 30 seconds, hours, then I can say I did my part. Not any more coffee, and my honey bunny back over in the other room there to have our morning discussions of our day. But Damien, have a great day, buddy. Anybody else who happens to show up later, watches this in the rebroadcast, you should have been here earlier. It was, well, I know you didn't skip to the end, so we missed you. How about that? We'll do it again in the morning, 8 o'clock. And we're going to bring some of Damien's stuff to the floor. I think it is good that I need to have an intro of some sort, kind of buffer out what's going to happen, what we're going to talk about, and put a little bit of structure in this totally non-structured, extemporaneous speeching exercise of knowing that we're not alone in this thing, and you're not crazy. Because if you're taking the time to listen to something like I'm doing, you're not crazy. You're just kind of like I am. looking for answers. Anyway, have a great one, man. We'll talk to everybody later. And let's go have a great Monday and a whole week of other stuff, too.